we're failing. Right? We're failing. Our education system is failing. You go watch the homeschooling kids, and you'll have kids that are walking around with books. Like our son, our oldest son, he would be in all kinds of weird positions. He'd be sitting on the couch upside down, reading a book, or walking up and down the stairs with a book. Not because we told him he had to read, but because he had a story that he was interested in, and we let him. We just said, "Go ahead." And so the kids could read early, and they could read fast. They did it. I actually think that kids want to learn, and this whole idea that kids hate school is because the state-driven type of framework is unnatural for how kids learn.
Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for coming by for another episode of the Ben Wehrman podcast. I appreciate you being here. Today we have Scott Lindberg, who is part of a duo who is really doing awesome stuff in the schooling / homeschooling / world schooling, unschooling. There's lots of different names for it. Maybe we could talk about that. But just this general idea of decentralizing education and raising kiddos. So super excited to bring you here, Scott. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks, Ben. I'm looking forward to it.
So why don't we start with a bit of your story, and we could just, I don't know, we could start wherever you'd like, but just sort of your fatherhood journey, perhaps. And were you always knowing that homeschooling was going to be the way for you, or did you learn about that as you went? How was that progression?
I had no idea what homeschooling was. So the progression was I started my career in the military. And then after 5 years in the Army, went to corporate America and quickly went to business school. And I was going to go be a management consultant. I met my wife in business school. She was going to be an investment banker. Neither of us really understood a lot of the things that we understand now. So as I tell you this story, I'm going to use language, but it's not language that I understood at the time. We have four kids. When our first one was born, for a lot of different reasons, she said, "Hey, I want to have the relationship with our daughter. I want to stay home as long as possible." Essentially, she said, "I want to homeschool." So this set off a couple of different things on her side of the family. It was, "Hey, you went to Yale. What are you doing throwing away your career with this? Why are you giving all that up?" My side was resistant more because I had gone to public school, and they took it personally that somehow this was an indictment against the decision of how they had raised me. So we had these internal family things, but we made a decision that if we could live on one income and give up some vacations or something else, that this was going to be worthwhile to do. That's where the journey started. You fast forward 20 years, all four of our kids have completed the K through 12 equivalent, and we decided to go full-time into free market kids. We also have it's on pause at the moment, but we're going to get back into it. We have a podcast called Bitcoin Homeschoolers, because what we've learned over the last few years is there's a tremendous amount that the values are so similar on the Bitcoin side and the homeschooling side that it's just, once you see it, it's one of those expressions that we overuse, but you can't unsee it. Bitcoiners are really easy to convince. Hey, self-custody your education or separation of education and state. We'll go through that, I'm sure, today. Homeschooling to Bitcoin is a bit of an uphill battle, we have found. They don't know that they don't know. So you have an awareness thing you have to get through, and then you have to get through money, and then it's kind of this multi-tier set of challenges. But long way of saying it, no idea what homeschooling was when we first got married. We kind of backed into it, and now with the recent experience of being around Bitcoiners for a few years, it just makes complete sense. It just fits the idea of freedom, the idea of parents being in control of their kids and deciding what to do, just like you can decide what to do with your money with Bitcoin. The overlap is just amazing, and our goal now is to try to share as much information as we can for people in either camp to help them along with their journey.
I find it so interesting. I keep seeing this pattern pop up where Bitcoin shoots out in all sorts of different directions and start thinking about all these things in different ways. For me, another example would be diet and health. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of the big topics I talk about, and you see Bitcoiners talking about, it's a big stereotype, is that we're all carnivores, we eat tons of steak. This
Yes.
is
Yes.
so. I went in that direction, and then I find the carnivore community, and it's much harder to get them to look at Bitcoin than it is for Bitcoiners to look at carnivore.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the exact same for you. And I
100%.
listened to your podcast you did with Daniel Prince when I was getting ready, and you talked about how you go to these homeschooling conferences, and you have your your Bitcoin theme sort of presented there through your game, which we'll talk about, Huddle Up, and you have difficulty getting. They kind of like scoff at it, like, oh, like what are Bitcoin people doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin is like it shoots off a lot of one-way streets. It's
Mm-hmm.
difficult to bring people back to Bitcoin, and I think that's mainly because of just the amount of FUD and nonsense that's been pushed out in the media. Just lumping that in with all the crypto scams essentially, and making it look really bad. Like, what do you think is the reason for that? Would you agree with me?
Well, there is a lot of noise out there. There is a lot of noise. And I look back at my own journey. I read Atlas Shrugged before I went to business school, before Bitcoin ever existed. I had read early in our marriage, again before Bitcoin existed. I read the book The Creature from Jekyll Island, and now I look back and I say, oh well, libertarians, here's how you connect with this, and objectivists, this is how you connect, and Austrian economists. So homeschoolers, it was that the expression I was using, and I don't remember if I used it when we talked with Daniel or not, is that homeschoolers are Bitcoiners who just don't know it yet. And the same is kind of with the carnivores. And then you go to someone who's maybe very religious and you say, well, let's talk about honest weights and measures. And I think it comes down to, these are first principle ideas, and it just takes time for the Overton window to change. And actually, we're missing it this year. We went to the Ohio convention for homeschoolers the last 2 years. We're missing it right now. We're going to come back to it next year, but the Overton window has changed. So within the homeschooling realm, the Tuttle Twins have, you've probably heard about it. They have with Angel Studios.
They're so awesome.
Right. So they're huge in the homeschooling space. When you walk into a homeschooling conference, they're usually one or number two in terms of the big sponsors for the event. So you also have it in the national politics now. You have it with the ETFs and the whole financial system. So the Overton window has changed, and with all of these entities, whether it's parents, it's carnivores, it's who you fill in your blank, it's changing over time. But these are first principle ideas, and they're just going to keep coming up, and we're going to go through that adoption curve. So yeah, maybe we're on the more innovative early adopter side, but we're just about to get to that the early first, what do they call them? The first, not first movers, but the early adopters. There's then like the early adopter main
slightly further on the bell curve, basically.
Yeah, I'm just not using the right phrase there, but we're about to kind of jump in terms of the number of people, and a lot of people like that expression, gradually then suddenly. I think we're on the cusp with schooling. I think we're on the cusp with diet. I think we're on the cusp with a lot of different areas. So I apologize, by the way. Our dogs are going nuts. I hope that's not interfering.
Oh, no worries. It adds atmosphere to the conversation. This is a family we're talking to. We got kids, we got dogs, we got madness all over the place.
I'm sorry about that. They're on a different floor, and they're so loud. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Okay.
It's all good. Totally fine. Yeah, that's super exciting that the Tuttle Twins are really penetrating that audience, because that is the perfect on-ramp for them to see why Bitcoin's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't actually watched a lot of the content myself. I've just seen small glimpses of it, but I know it's very libertarian focused. They push Bitcoin in there, right? I know they've had Saifedean on there. So
they have an episode or two, I think there's at least two, where they specifically talk about Bitcoin. They have a little cartoon character that is Satoshi, and his face is always blocked, and he's the guide for the twins. So I honestly, our kids are older, so I haven't gone back to watch them myself. Just all I know is that if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to start in a new area. You want that Cinderella spot where if there's nobody there, you have an uphill battle because no one knows about it. And if it's oversaturated, well, that has a different set of consequences. But the Tuttle Twins being there is, I think, good. Like you're basically saying there is a market for this. And it's okay that you have a Burger King and a McDonald's or a Pepsi and a Coke and whatever your options are. It's okay to have multiple players in a space. It's actually better for competition. From an awareness standpoint, this should help us get the word out to other people. They should be more open-minded about it. And honestly, if you learn through them instead of us, okay, that's fine. But if collectively the society is moving up that curve we were just talking about, we're all better off. So it's okay. So
Yeah, the tide's rising and it's lifting all the boats. I think this is a perfect example where all of us are so early to it, and there's a very clear vibe of us all being on the same team. Even the most clear competitors within the Bitcoin space are still friends. Like on Twitter, they're tagging each other and having fun. Like these companies are doing the exact same thing because they know that the more that they all succeed, it helps everyone, which is super cool.
Yeah, our incentives are aligned. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that you aren't making it this year to the conference, but you are next year, I think that you'll probably see a huge jump because normally it's like a slow curve, but it's exponential as you're seeing. And so that'll be very interesting to see how many more people have a different reaction to your Bitcoin booth after this. So
we'll let you know.
To see that. Very exciting.
We'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Free Market Kids. So this is your project. So what exactly is Free Market Kids, and why should incoming or current parents know about it?
Our mission basically is to teach the things that we wish the tools we had to teach our kids. We wish we would have had these before. So Tali and I are looking at each other, and we go through this Bitcoin journey. We're still on it, obviously. And for me, this led to Austrian economics and load time preference and the diet, all these other things there. But we're looking at this, and we're looking at our kids, and we're saying, okay, if 2 Yale MBAs can get rugged by deciding to go into debt, fill in the blank, the house, going to school, whatever it is, what are we going to teach our kids in this world? And then you realize that it really applies to anybody. It can apply to veterans. It can apply to adults. It can certainly apply to parents. So I would actually say Free Market Kids is more for all parents. It's not just meant for homeschooling. We're talking about that because that's our background. The game piece of that, I happen to like games. I believe there's a lot of other things too. I grew up with board games. So the fellowship side of this, where you and I and people of different generations and physical abilities can sit down for an hour without a screen and actually engage with each other. That's something that I think most people would agree we need more of and less of the screen time. Whole separate rabbit hole to go down. And that's what our mission is. We want to help the next generation with these things. And it's not just Bitcoin. Within the Bitcoin space, Huddle Up that's how we broke into it, because it's all based on Bitcoin and it resonated with Bitcoiners. And I have a lightning game. I have a seed phrase game. In a few months, I'll be launching a game called Fed Up, where it's not about Bitcoin. It's about ending the Fed in Clown World. And so I love it. Yeah,
that's such a great name.
So my goal, the big vision of Free Market Kids, if you want to take a load time preference perspective on this, is I want to come out with a first principle game every year for 21 years. And then with those games, I want to have a book that goes with it. I want to have courses that go with it, and eventually have a digital product that you can translate in other languages and do some other cool stuff. So I have a long-term view of what I want to do with this. So we started with the games. We have multiple games now. I am working on some of those other elements, going kind of in the vertical for those. I'm working on a course right now on money. I have built 6 out of the 10 modules for it so far. So those are the kind of things. And that's one of the reasons for pausing on the homeschooling conferences. When we went before, all we had was just the games. And we're a lot more than that. We're talking about, think about how valuable it is, the skills that you want to teach your kids to be successful are not what the traditional school system is going to say. So you should be learning about AI. You should be learning critical thinking skills. You should be learning about health. There's a lot of things that you should be doing, but we went in there with just primarily the game. And so now we want to have multiple games, and we want to have courses to go with them. And then Tali's working on my games are really age 13 above. We've seen people younger than 10 play, and they do just fine. But the target audience is really teenagers and above. She's addressing elementary school kids in terms of character, critical thinking, and other types of things. So next year we want to go in there with a bigger portfolio of things, like a toolbox, if you will, for parents to use, and there'll be more things to resonate with. Free Market Kids itself, though, it's all about that mission of these are tools to help parents teach first principle type things. And the problem I have, and I think anybody in the space would have, is when you label a game educational, it's automatically labeled as boring. So I specifically make these that if you just shut up and don't talk about the subject, you as a Bitcoiner, sorry about that. You as a Bitcoiner are going to say, hey, this game Huddle Up is all based on the mechanics. Here's a difficulty adjustment, hot and cold wallets and halvings. Your head's going to explode with all the connections. But you could just be quiet, not say a word, spend 45 minutes or an hour with your friends or family or whatever it is that you're doing, and just have fun with the game. And that's the intent of how I'm building these. The geeky side of me that says, hey, I want to educate on this stuff. Okay, if you want to go down that side, parents, go at it, or teachers. Here's all the concepts that are in the game, and here's how you can integrate them and make this a more interactive way of doing it. But you don't need to do that. You can push all that stuff aside and say, we just want to have fun. I just want to have an hour of fun at my meetup, or I want to slowly introduce things to my kids and spend some time together. I want to make that to me, that's a core principle, is that it has to be fun by itself. The moment you start to start saying this is just an education tool, you may as well label the game boring to people, even if it's not. I don't think it's boring, but the perception of what's inside is kind of negatively impacted by that. So I'm trying to highlight that it's fun. And yes, when someone like yourself is asking me questions about education, happy to talk about all this stuff. But they're great for gifts and for meetups and for other events, because you can just shut up and play and not say a word about any of that stuff.
I love it. And I am such a strong believer that the best connecting tool to bring people together, especially families, is just, like you said, physical games that don't require a screen, where you sit around a table and you have fun with each other and you just play. Like, everyone has those wonderful memories of playing board games as a kid. I definitely do. I remember just my family and my friends' families all getting together. We'd have game nights, and it's so fun. You have such a great connecting experience. And I think when you're in that mindset of just connecting with the people around you, and also sometimes there's teamwork involved and camaraderie, it gets your brain in that learning state. It's more malleable to absorbing new information. And so that's when you can really sneak stuff in easily. And even something like Monopoly, I would say, is sort of educational. It teaches you, buy assets that generate income later. And so a lot of games do have these little lessons sprinkled in, but we're seeing more games like yours where there's really a focus on making sure that when that education does slip in, it's really valuable on a very important topic like Bitcoin.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think as an educator, I could take Monopoly and I could teach you about inflation. I can teach you about financial abstraction. I could teach you a lot of other things with it. The thing as a parent, though, you also want to protect the kids from some of the super bad stuff. And okay, if I give my kid this thing with the screen, they kind of get addicted to the screen pretty quickly. But it's a good distraction. So if you're really stressed as a parent and that's going to take some time and they're occupied, it's very easy to give into that temptation and let them do that. A lot of those things, though, the slippery slope of that is some of them get pretty violent, and there's a lot of things in there that maybe they're not violent, but they don't add any value. They're just kind of out there. So at least with a physical game, it's okay for kids to be bored. It's a rainy day. You can't go outside. What do? You have something and you're forced to play with blocks or Legos or a game or something. That's okay. You don't have to occupy someone all the time. And the physical movement of things. I mean, this is we've probably commented this on the Daniel Prince podcast, and that was the way that Tali actually opened up to Bitcoin was because when we were physically moving around things, she's like, oh, okay, I get the concept now. And then she opened up to other things. So not everybody learns the same way. And so I completely agree with you on spending time together with people away from the screens like that. I think is, even if you didn't learn anything, is fantastic. I think for parents that want to protect their kids from some of the more violent or other types of materials that might be, other graphic materials that might be in games, it's nice to know that you can go to some place, you find your Tuttle Twins or your free market kids or your whoever that you feel is relatively trusted. And now you know if your kids are playing it, you're not worried about these other things being interjected.
And I might take things even a step further than you there. I mean, obviously, if the content that the kids are finding, which the internet and social media are unfortunately sort of designed to angle them into these things like sexual content, violent content, things that are just like really visually stimulating. Even if they're just watching something that appears to be innocent, like I'm sure you've heard of the show Coco Melon. Have you heard of this?
I have not, no.
Oh, interesting. So basically, it's just this TV show on YouTube for kids or whatever, and it's this show that is super popular, like billions of viewers, tons of parents are showing this to their kids.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like if you type this in on YouTube, you'll find it. But basically, it's become very controversial because it's the show producers literally have a laboratory where they are doing studies on kids that watch their show. They put them in front of the TV, and they have two screens in front of them where they have their Coco Melon show on one side, and the other side is just, more regular, it's like pictures of butterflies and people reading a book and walking in the park and an ocean, like natural things that, one would think was, boring compared to their like super engaging TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually track when the kids will look away from the screen to look at the other one. And they say, oh, we aren't addicting them enough.
Mm-hmm.
We need to add more colors, more loud noises, more music, more stimulating content, and like hard cuts in the content. Like they're literally designing this to be a drug to young brains, to just like be completely stuck to the screen.
Yeah. Well, think about the incentives too, Ben.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were the one whose job depended on the success of that game, then the more users and the longer they use it, et cetera, maybe there's more things they buy when they're in the game, however it's set up, the more job security you have. And so it's not necessarily someone's evil. It's just, where do the incentives lead to? So if you're in the media and you lead with a story of something good, and your competitor leads with a whole lot of controversy, here's people fighting, here's violence, here's something else, something scary like the COVID or something, you're going to get more views over there. Well, if you get more views, you're going to get more advertisement, and therefore your network can grow. So it's the incentives are aligned with the games to make them that way. That's naturally where they go. So you as a parent, this is where I would say you as a parent have a responsibility to understand that thing. You can't change that, but if you explain that and give kids credit, they can pick up things really fast. That's a thing I don't like about the way our public school system is kind of set up, where it's kind of assuming that the kids are not smart, they won't be able to get things too fast, and you want to basically dumb them down. And kids are actually, they'll understand these concepts if you explain it to them, and you're there as you are the guide to help them through this growth that they're going through. Then they can learn to identify it for themselves. So it's not just me saying, Ben, you cannot use the video. I can say, hey, Ben, here's what's going on with this. The people who make this game are doing this intentionally for that. We're going to go play this game over here, this board game. And the benefits are you're going to spend time with your grandparents and younger siblings. Like you explain it in a different way. They're going to figure it out, and they're going to be able to apply that to other places. So there's lessons that you can teach your kids on how to think critically, how to think big picture, how to get along with others. The social aspect is huge. as homeschoolers, our kids, one of the biggest pieces of FUD out there is that kids are not social. Our kids can talk to anybody, adults, kids, their peers, customers. I mean, anybody. They can talk to anybody. And so that's another thing you can explain is, hey, if you're playing a video game with only your peers, you're learning a certain type of social skills, and then all of a sudden you're put in a real world environment like a job, and they don't have those skills. Whereas I can help develop skills that aren't even related to the board game. I can help you develop skills on how to think. I can help you develop social skills. There's just a ton of other things you can do. It's really, really flexible. You, as the parent, are the one that can guide them with it. It's just a tool to help you be the guide for them. So it's hard to do, though. I'll tell you, I have a hard time just getting my own family to play games. Here I am trying to tell you all these great things. It's not easy. I'm not saying this is easy, but I'm saying the proof of work will be when your kids are older and they exhibit those types of skills and they have those kind of thoughts for themselves to think through things, like the don't trust, verify. They can think on their own. They're going to be better with critical thinking. They're going to be better with social skills if you're the one who's able to control that narrative and explain it to them.
Yeah, and I think that's an important framework for parents to think about too, is that the spectrum of easy to difficult is at play here. Like the easiest thing you can do is stuff an iPad in your kid's face and then they're pacified for hours. And I see so many parents doing this all over the places I travel. I do a lot of traveling, so when I was in Mexico, I'd see this everywhere. And just strollers just basically have an iPad in them by default, pretty much. And it's so unfortunate. And at the same time, I also see tons and tons of young kids with glasses on. And I think that's a whole different, rabbit hole, the health side. But, when your eyes are just being burnt out by these blue light screens all the time, that's definitely a factor as well. They're, drinking these sugar drinks their parents are giving them, eating seed oils.
Yes,
there's so many of these mistakes that parents are making. They don't know that they're big mistakes. I think that they don't understand the damage that's being done. But I just pulled up that site I was telling you about, the Coco Melon TV show. Guess how many subscribers they have on YouTube? Take a whack.
I don't know, 2 million.
192 million.
Oh, wow.
192 million subscribers to this TV show, which is basically exactly what these parents are just like pulling up. It's got to be on the top of like the YouTube Kids, and that's what they're showing their kids when they just put the iPad in front of their face. So it's just the difference between that and what you're building, just these things that engage people. I think it's pretty safe to say there are very few cases where a screen will or a screen-based activity is going to help teach you real social skills or connect you with people. I think that I might have found one of those exceptions when I was growing up, because I was really big on like multiplayer video games. So like me and my buddies were all playing them together, and there was definitely teamwork involved, and I made new friends that way.
Yeah.
But that's like a very rare exception. Most of the time it's going to be detracting from what is a much better option, which is in-person connection. I think that's always going to be better, even if you are doing this screen thing as good as you possibly can.
Yeah, and I'm not saying go 100% and take all the screens away. For some people who, if that's the way they socialize, and that's the only way your kid is able to connect, then who am I to tell you not to let them do it? But at least go into it eyes wide open. If you know that you need to reduce blue light, maybe increase your red light, natural light, and you can get into the whole light science, you should talk to Talia about that, because it's a huge focus for her. But I'm not going to tell you not to do it. I think the carnivore diet makes 100%. It makes sense to me, but we slip. We'll go on and we'll have our snacks, especially if it's a holiday or something, and so is some hardcore Bitcoin carnivore only going to say, oh, Scott is willing to eat something that's not meat? Okay, fine. I think for parenting, it's up to you, and that's actually the key part of it. Is if you self-custody parenting, you're the one closest to the child. You're the one that's going to know and has the greatest incentive to try to do what's right for them. And you can make that call. I'm just saying it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of this tension back and forth all the way through, but it's worth it. The long-term vision of what you get with that is worth it. But don't trust other people to take care of your kid. Don't trust other people to do what's right for you as a parent. You're the one that knows best, and you don't need any government certification to say you're qualified as an administrator or a teacher or anything else. Humans did just fine teaching the next generation how to survive before the governments came in to certify you, or big education came in to certify you. You don't need that. You already have everything you need, and you have the greatest incentive to help the kids. Your incentives as a parent are aligned with the what's in the best interest of the kid. And so you take self-custody of that. You decide what you're going to do or not do. So
I think that's an amazing transition into just talking about what is homeschooling, because so many people, when they hear this word, they think that homeschooling is this radical new experiment that some crazy parents are trying, when in reality, it's the exact opposite. This has been the norm for forever.
100%.
The government schooling system is the real experiment, and it's failing. If you look at every single metric that matters in terms of, what these kids are turning out to be, just cogs in these machines that don't understand basic life skills. How do you approach that for someone who's starting to open up to this idea, and like maybe looking at the historical component? What's your elevator pitch for what homeschooling is and why this is the true foundation of education for kids?
I wish I had just one pitch. It depends on who I'm talking to. You hit on a few things there. So there's a lot of work that shows what's happened as governments and centralization has gotten greater. It's in the interest of those that have control, whether they're central planners, whatever you want to call them, the government, the whoever, to have control over how people think. So conformity is more important than critical thinking, and that's also more important than creativity. So their incentive is that the parent wants their kid to have a long, healthy, happy life. They want to be the most successful that they can be. There's two different incentives in terms of what's in play there. Trying to explain that to someone if they're new to this thought process is just overwhelming. I don't want to sound like I'm a nut saying, hey, here's this big picture thing, and let me tell you about the Prussian education system, and they just don't want to. It's like too much. I would say for most people, it's more of just realizing you may not think you're able to. So a lot of people, I think, are lacking some confidence to start. You have everything you need. Your kids are super resilient. You have very little to lose, and you have amazing asymmetric upside to taking this on. And I 100% agree with you about long-term homeschooling was more the norm. And it's more in the last 100 years as we kind of look at the central banks too, as we've kind of grown through the centralization and this idea that somehow a different entity should be in control of your kids and what they learn. And if you look at totalitarian types of governments as an extreme, they want to control the kids. They don't want religion. They don't want parents. They don't want anybody else to interfere with what the state wants them to conform to. So that's big picture stuff. If you're already a Bitcoiner and you understand a lot of these similar concepts with money, it's very easy to just give the elevator speech on that. If you're not, I don't have a really good way of explaining all that other than saying it's your kid, why are you going to trust these? And then you can kind of give examples. COVID was a great example where parents didn't realize what was really going on with the schools. They say, I trust the government, I trust whoever, they're probably doing the right thing. And then they realized that they weren't. And we're just seeing more and more cases of this. And I just think they help open their eyes. So There's a Supreme Court case that's either just heard or in the process of being heard. I think it's either Maine or Maryland. I'm trying to think of whether they're basically saying they wanted to force certain types of sexual books on 4 and 5-year-olds, and they wouldn't let the parents opt out of it. They didn't even say take it off the shelf. The parents just wanted to say, I don't want my kid to learn that. And that's eye-opening for people to say, what? Like, they're not only are they not teaching the things they do need to succeed, they're actually forcing some of these other things that I don't want them to hear about, right? And then there was another one that was on my mind recently. Oh, the universities. So universities have become incredibly biased to one side of the spectrum, to the point where you're basically indoctrinating anybody who goes through it. And if you're a parent and you say, well, hey, I trust that the Ben's going to go to this university and they have a great prestigious name and whatnot. And then you find out, as you hear this argument about who should get funding and not funding, depending on who's following what kind of policies, the institutions have different objectives. And different people can put pressure on them. And I think it's just helping to open up people's eyes. So you could use some of those examples, depending on who you're talking to. You could cite an example of something that relates to somebody that, if their kid's about to go to college, then maybe you talk about that. If their kid's already in elementary school, you can talk about that Supreme Court case. It could be the COVID thing. Most people understand what happened with that is people went to Zoom calls and they realized that what was really being taught or not taught to their kids. But you can use an example that they can relate to, and then pose to them, hey, there's a lot of options on how you can take control of this too. And going back to your point earlier, homeschooling isn't just one prescribed thing. Maybe it's just additional things that you do with your kids at night and the weekends, but they're actually going to a regular school. Maybe it's a combination of co-ops and micro schools or something like that. There are some that do unschooling, and there's all these other different flavors out there. But if you complement a real life example with, hey, you know what? You can take control over this thing. You actually have a lot of tools at your disposal. Because then you get into things like, so the whole idea of technology being deflationary, I can find almost any lesson on any subject in any language on the internet. Right? So the cost of education should be coming down. It shouldn't be going the way it's going. You have so many tools that to help teach your kids almost anything. It's just an amazing. We can get, like, Khan Academy is out there. I know Saylor has his Saylor.org, and there's a whole bunch of others. And you can pay small amounts for a small course. You can do other things. I mean, it's just amazing amount of technology that the technology enables so many different offerings for you that you're not asking anybody to do anything that's not within reason. And so you can gear your recommendation to what they have the time and resources to actually do.
So many directions to go off of that. Lots of great content. So I guess just on that last one you're talking about, I want to stick on that for a second here. So this idea of how much free educational content we have out there, what would your recommendation be to new parents who are just getting into this? And you mentioned a couple there, Khan Academy, Saylor Academy. Where do you think people should start? Should they start by, sort of researching these different options out there that have free education already? Or should they start by, as a parent, just coming up with your own? It seems like that would probably be more of a steep hill to climb, more intimidating to, like, create your own curriculum. Maybe you could start with one of those that's already been made and then work off it in your own special way. What do you think?
I would say you'd almost have to back up a step, and it depends on how confident are you in what you're doing. So if you say, I know I want to do this for my kid and I am determined to figure it out, you're going to do the research and you're going to find things. I think a lot of people don't know. If you're a first-time parent, you just don't know. And maybe your family doesn't support you, or you don't have family that's close by. So I would recommend trying to find other like-minded people. So if you're on Facebook, maybe you go to a homeschooling convention just to meet other parents and just to talk to people. And and learn for yourself. Put your oxygen mask on first before you help others. Before you start going down this path of trying to figure out this perfect curriculum, just try to figure out your own support system of who you're going to talk to. It could be, maybe there's a co-op in your area and you can meet people in person, and that's fantastic. Maybe you can't get to a conference because it's too expensive or too far away, but it doesn't mean that there aren't groups out there, online type of groups that you can get to. But I would try to find someone else that you feel comfortable talking to about what you're experiencing, so that then you can ask anything. You're saying, hey, I want to teach my kids Latin, or I want to teach my kids AI, or I want to teach my kids whatever it is. Now you have somebody you can plug into. Churches, if you're in a church, you probably could just ask around to see if there's homeschoolers within that organization. But I would start there. You can also go online. I think it's the Homeschool Defense League. I forget the website address. We can find it, put it in your notes. You can go online, and there are organizations that will help you think through what to do for homeschooling if you're not sure. I think you need to have that confidence before you go out and start researching on your curriculum. Because I think if you just go on the path of saying education is all about this curriculum, it's going to feel overwhelming, or it could feel overwhelming. Whereas if you just say, why am I doing this? Well, I'm doing this because I want a relationship with my child. I'm doing this because I want the best for whatever it is. You just have to ground yourself. So I would start with that and lay your foundation on. And then on top of that, you can build curriculum, you can build what programs to get, you can do other research, but start with the foundation of what are you doing, and have some kind of, if you can, support group. Not everybody is fortunate enough to have people around them, family or friends, that think that it's a good thing to do. And if you don't have that, you go off and you research all these things that we just talked about a few of them. If you're not confident in what you're doing, you're not going to use them anyway. Because of the pressure. So I would say get your foundation right whatever you need for that, and now you can do anything you want. From there, you'll find what you need.
I'd love to just confirm we have the right site. You mentioned the Homeschool Defense League. I just Googled that, and I see HSLDA Advocates for Homeschooling. Is that what you're talking about?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. But yeah, I think overall, your point is excellent, that it should start with finding a community of other people that are doing this around you, because there's also going to be geographical benefits to that, where you may want to cater your schedule to it too. Like if you're somewhere where there's lots of great nature, you want to spend lots of time in nature, learning about the different trees around you and different mushrooms and all these cool things. And if you're by the ocean, maybe you could include surfing or something, and swimming, and just using your environment to your advantage, and having a community around with like lots of ideas for how to learn about your home turf. I think that's definitely a good part of learning as well. Because as someone who grew up on an island full of nature, that was a huge part of my upbringing, just going out, doing lots of hikes and swimming and all these fun things.
Yeah.
So very cool. That's in the good place to find that, if it hasn't started yet, is go to a Bitcoin meetup, find other people who are either current or aspiring homeschooling parents, and then you could start your own homeschooling community outside of that as sort of branch off.
And think about it. Daniel Prince, his podcast, he also wrote a book. There are books you can read, podcasts you can listen to. Even if you can't attend a homeschooling convention, you can still go to their website and you can look at their resources and find people to reach out to. You're not alone. You're not alone on this, and just commit. I think instead of trying to have enough courage up front to say, hey, or I'm sorry, not courage, confidence. Instead of having enough confidence up front to think that you can do everything, just start with commitment. I am committed to do this. And then if you have that reasoning, and then you can find others around you, then you can work through what it takes to do it in your area. But between books and podcasts and all these other events and things that we've talked about, there's a lot of information out there. And so if you're in Germany and homeschooling is illegal, you're probably going to have a very different approach than maybe somebody who's in Texas. right? I mean, so your geography, the jurisdiction can make an impact, and so my point is, it's worth it. It is absolutely 100% worth it. You have almost no downside risk, and you have this amazing upside potential for your child and for your relationship with your child. Just say, I'm committing to finding out. And then don't trust me. Go verify for yourself. Go out and hear the stories and the good and the bad. What are you trying to avoid? What are you trying to pursue? You'll figure the rest of it out. And then after you do it, then you'll realize, hey, I actually do have the capacity to do this. And that will build your confidence. But the confidence comes last. The whole journey starts with your commitment up front.
I'd love to dig a little deeper on this idea that homeschooling is, like you said, basically no downside with unlimited upside. Could you dig a little deeper on each of those pieces? Like, why is there no downside? I'm sure people out there think, oh, but they won't get any social skills. And then the upside as well. Like, look at each of those individually. Like, why do you argue that on both sides?
So the downside piece would be just realize kids are amazingly resilient. So let's hypothetically say you have a child and you put them into preschool or elementary school. You decide to pull them out for a year and you want to try this, or maybe they haven't gone to school at all yet, and you're going to try it out for a year. A year into it, you say, Scott's wrong. I don't think this is the right thing to do. Your kid's fine. You're not. You haven't. They're really adaptable. They're going to be fine if you said, I'm going to transition back into whatever the default is. So you're not going to permanently damage your kid. If you're an abusive parent, you have other issues. I'm not talking about that. If you're a loving parent and you're just trying to figure out what kind of activities and what kind of social calendar or whatever it is that you're trying to do, and you think that you're going to make a mistake and now your kid's going to be behind, they're not going to have socialization or some other FUD that's out there. The reality is that kids are really resilient and they will bounce back. The upside is a couple-fold. So just talk academically. If you're in a school and your teacher, let's say you have 20 to 30 kids, you're going to have to focus on the median. You can't focus on the people on either side. The people who need extra time because they're slow, they have some kind of, they're struggling with something. They need special attention. You don't have enough time to do one-on-one coaching with them. You also don't have time for the people who want to excel. So if you have an exceptional student, you can't give them what they need. So now they're bored. They're probably going to get in more trouble because they're bored, but you're also holding them back from what their true potential is, right? So that's just the pure academic side. There's the time side of it where the traditional school system, for a lot of different reasons, it's really inefficient with time. And if you allow your kids just to do their own thing, you could probably get most of your classes done in an hour or two that would normally take an 8-hour school day, depending on how they're broken up. You allow your kid to get into flow. You can adapt because you've lowered the ratio of the teacher to student in there, right? So that's one potential upside is the compound effect of a student who can accelerate. You can now let them accelerate to their full potential. The compound effect of working with a student who has whatever special needs, you can help them to where they need to be. You're not gearing towards the average student. You're laser focused. And then the big one, the really big one, and Seb Bunny gets into this. He has in his book, Money Ruins Everything. One of the things that we're losing right now as a society is the relationships. And our kids have a relationship with us, even though they're all adults now. And they have made the comment that once they got out of the homeschooling realm and they were in the adult environment, either at universities or work, their peers did not have the relationship with their parents, and they did not understand why our kids would say that they would talk to us, let alone share details about relationships and other things. And the reason for that is, even though you go through hard times and not everything is smooth, it's going to have some volatility to it, some emotional volatility, the kids are going to realize that you love them and you're investing in them. And so the biggest asymmetric upside, besides time management, besides letting people pursue their natural gifts and all these other benefits that you could have, the really big upside is the relationship. If you hire a nanny or you outsource everything with the schooling and the coaching and everything else, and then kids are teenagers or adults and they don't have a relationship with you, it's how are you going to build that now? How are you going to build that relationship? So if you think about the future from a load time preference perspective, what is the relationship you want to have with your kids in 15 years and 20 years? And you work backwards. The asymmetric upside is that amazing relationship. We can get into the academics and what you studied and all these other things. And by the way, the idea of critical thinking and socialization, that is just FUD. My personal observation is that the homeschooling kids actually are better in general on those fronts. But the relationship side, that is unbelievably valuable. And so I say, okay, let's put these two things back together. If I try to homeschool and it doesn't work for any reason, my kid goes back into the other program and they're fine. They'll catch up with the others. If you think they're behind in socialization or whatever it is that you think you're behind in, you're not going to ruin your kid, right? They're so resilient. On the other side, all these other things that you can really, really value in the long term, you have to do the work up front. And that's the time with the kids and working through the things with the kids. If you spend time with them, that's the value. And you can't go back and capture that. There's I don't know the exact percentage, but they talk about the percentage of time you're going to spend with your kid while they're young. Like 80% of your time you'll ever spend with them is below a certain age. And then as they get older, if I go and visit my parents and we go up there, we can see them once a month. We don't, but let's say we did. Compared to when you're at home and you see your parents every day, right? So if you see your parents once a year and they're a certain age and they're only going to live so long, I don't want to be morbid about it, but just do the math. Most of your time with your kids is going to be below a certain age. Okay, so how do you want to spend your most precious asset, your time? And put all of that into the potential upside. That's what you're going to say no to if you say, I don't want to test this out. I don't want to verify for myself whether this is worthwhile. That's what you give up. That's your opportunity cost. If you do decide to do it and it doesn't work out, the worst that happened is you spent a little time with your kid and now they got to catch up at school. So I don't know how more asymmetric this decision can be. And you asked before about an elevator speech. I don't know a way of condensing that. I need to work on that to find a way. But those are the two ends of the spectrum that I'm looking at.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to sort of lay things out for the scariest possible scenario for parents of like, oh, they might be a little bit potentially behind at knowing how to do like long division or, some science experiment or whatever it is that, they're teaching in public school. But what have you actually seen happen? Have you actually seen kids falling behind in these areas, or do you actually see that they are instead actually accelerating much more in how they're learning? What have you seen?
I've seen both. I think if you're, as a parent, if you decide that you're only going to teach your kids a certain set of things and you specifically don't teach them about math, okay, well, then they're going to fall behind that. What I think is more likely the case is you can accelerate it because you don't have it broken up. So if you're going back to the time management type of thing, the amount of wasted time for someone to go to school, you got to go in the school bus maybe, or there's travel time there's time between classes. There's a lot of wasted time. And you never really get into flow because your time's now broken up by a bell, right? So you're going to go into a classroom and you're going to go in there to study math. And then your teacher is going to be in a public school is going to be geared towards that middle because they don't have time to work on the special needs at the high end or the low end. So now you may or may not be getting the right level of instruction that you need. Then even if you happen to get into flow, the bell rings and you got to move on to the next thing anyway. The calendar year is broken up, so you're off in the summer. So you, at least in the US, you're going to spend the first part of your next semester or next year trying to relearn the stuff you learned from the before. Contrast that with homeschooling. Homeschooling, you do year round. Your kid can focus on something for as long or short as they want and get into flow. So let's say you actually like math and I let you study it for longer and you take on extra things and you're allowed to work on it a couple hours a day and you don't have this interruption and wasted time. And because you're doing it around the clock or around the calendar, you're not constantly trying to fall back and relearn stuff every year. So the compound effect of what you can structure as a homeschooling parent is you can fast track any subject you want, because it doesn't have to be math. This could be language. This could be science. This could be music. This could be a physical sport. It could be anything that you want to allow your kid to focus in a way that maximizes their potential there. And so just the frameworks of how you use your time are completely different. So does it mean everybody will use it that way? No. You'll have people whose kids might fall behind on something. On the other hand, if the parent is the one that has the incentive of the kid's future in mind, they're thinking, I want to prepare my kid, and they fall behind in reading, guess what? If anything, those parents go to a greater extreme to help make sure their kids get the right focus to get to where they're going. So the incentives, it's almost like a self-correcting type of thing. If you fall too far behind and you as a parent have your incentives aligned with the kid, you're actually then going to probably spend more time to address that need than would otherwise happen. But there's no way that anybody can guarantee you that if you do this, yes, you're going to accelerate. I think you'll find examples of one way or another, but just have a level playing field, you have a lot more advantages when you can control all those factors, because you can change your time, you can change your resources, you can change whatever. On the state-driven type of school, you don't have as much flexibility with that, and there's actually a greater risk of falling behind. And I don't believe in it's sort of like looking at CPI versus monetary inflation. I don't agree with all the fiat education metrics, but even if you go by test scores, we're not proficient in reading. Like, I forget the percentage off the top of my head. I should have done it before the show, but we're failing. Right? We're failing. Our education system is failing. You go watch the homeschooling kids, and you'll have kids that are walking around with books. Like our oldest son he would be in all kinds of weird positions. He'd be sitting on the couch upside down, reading a book, or walking up and down the stairs with a book. Not because we told him he had to read, but because he had a story that he was interested in, and we let him. We just said, go ahead. And so the kids could read early and they could read fast. They did it. I actually think that kids want to learn. And this whole idea that kids hate school is because the state-driven type of framework is unnatural for how kids learn. And so, all right, I went too long on that, but that I think you're more likely to accelerate than you are to dampen someone's abilities.
No, I love it. I think that's great. And I think that the way that I would summarize it is just that you're giving more trust and power to the child to figure out naturally what they resonate with. Which of these excuse me, which of these paths really works with their brain type. Mm-hmm. Because I remember, we all remember who went through public school growing up, that there are certain kids who really struggle with a certain subject. The classic one's usually math, mm-hmm. where you can tell that they have a really bright mind, they have a really great future ahead of them, but they just struggle at the numbers being put together or whatever the subject may be. And the current fiat schooling system really punishes you, even if you're really good at all the other ones. if you're bad at one, you get this bad grade letter,
Mm-hmm.
and it brings down your GPA, and you're told that you need to you need to focus more on this thing that you don't really enjoy doing or are good at,
Yeah.
and it just steals your time and energy from being able to focus on the things that you do like and are good at.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
essentially, it just gives you and your kids that ability to just be more flexible with things, because there's nothing less flexible than the fiat schooling system.
Mm-hmm.
It's like so rigid, like you've talked about how
Yeah.
like an hour here, an hour there, the bell rings, you have to go here, you have
Mm-hmm.
to raise your hand if you
Yep.
need to go to the bathroom. Like it's literally like a jail
Yeah.
basically, with some teachers teaching you things that aren't even relevant to you.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to add on how you talked about this idea that kids really want to learn, but oftentimes being forced into a certain path is what the real thing that stops you from going down that learning journey. And I can use myself as an example here. You talked about books and just reading. I never liked reading when I was in school. I always hated it because we're forced to read.
Mm-hmm.
But later on, many years later, after I graduated, what do you know? All of a sudden, I want to read some books.
I want to read some books. Yeah.
That's just how it goes. It's like as soon as your things open up and you have the ability to choose your own
Yeah.
path, it feels so much more organic. And the homeschooling model really lets, like, the parents are really just a guardrail, and sort of just you're there to assist them in their own organic path. Is that how you'd basically summarize it?
Yeah. Well, not only would I agree with that, but I'd say you're actually hitting on a couple of other things. So one, the way that you learn is by failing. You watch a kid stand up and fall, whether it's to walk or ride a bike or whatever it is. When you get that bad grade, you're basically sending the message that it's not okay to fail, right? That's fundamentally not good. Yes, I get it. You didn't get whatever it was on the concept, and it's a way of measuring where you are. I'm not arguing against that. I'm just saying there's a certain message that goes with that, saying, Ben, you failed. You got a red. You got something wrong. Bad, right? And now you're like, oh, my grades are in danger, and whatever else you're thinking. So that was one thing. And then the other thing that you said, there's another thing you said in there that I wanted to comment on. I know what it is. Thank you. You're also sending the message that when you grade that way, that you need somebody else to justify whether or not you're progressing and you're doing okay, right? So if you write an essay and I have a political agenda and I mark you down, like you're almost trying to say, I need an authority figure to justify whether or not I'm okay, right? And you're ingraining that in that system. The teacher's going to say whether or not I'm okay, the test, the whatever that's in there. And so there's a couple of second and third kind of impacts that you're having. One, failure's bad. That's not true. That's not how we learn. If you're an entrepreneur, you need to try and try and try and try again, right? That's the way we do things. That's how I develop the games. They're not perfect the first time. I do like as many game tests as I can do to try to work it out. And the second thing is, who gets to say what is okay and not okay? And you're basically saying, I want the state, I want the teacher, I want the administrator, I want somebody else gets to tell me whether or not I'm okay. And you kind of that's a way that you're breeding in conformity into their minds, that I need this extra layer to tell me when it's okay. And you don't need, whereas if you're teaching your kids at home, something happens, and like, I don't know, the dog makes a mess, or there's a glass breaks, or something happens, you can now say, okay, you can now help teach that child, well, what did you do about it? And you start to say, well, oh, wait, I got to take action. Yeah, you don't need me there. Go clean it up. Right? Go, or if like you can teach different things that are not even part of the curriculum. You can teach, in that case, that you can think for yourself. You don't need someone else's authority to do that. Or the kid doesn't get something done. You gave them an assignment, they couldn't read the book, whatever it is, and you can flip it around and help them learn how to learn. How do I learn from my mistakes? Should I feel bad about myself? Should I worry about it? Or do I look at that as this is an opportunity? Now I know the wrong way of doing it. Now I can try it another way. Think about what that framework does for their lifetime. And kids are like sponges. They will apply it to other areas. If you teach someone that, hey, it didn't work with the relationship, with the academics, with the job, with the whatever, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to feel bad about yourself? Are you going to look for somebody else to justify how you feel or whatever? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Versus, I touched the stove and it hurt. So I think I'm not going to touch the stove again. Let me try again, and encourage them to use that. It's like the resistance is a way of making you stronger, right? If you teach kids that principle versus the conformity of a public state school, that's not even a curriculum item. You're teaching them a framework on things, and those are the things that are more subliminal, where the damage in one system is harder to see, and the benefits of the other are also hard to see in the short term. But in the long term, you can see the compound effects of how the kids turn out in terms of, are they able to problem solve? Do they need other people to tell them whether they're okay or not? It's just there's so many second and third layer types of things that you can do when you take control over the parenting, when you have self-custody of your parenting versus trusting somebody else to do it. Is it possible a teacher is going to teach them that stuff? Yeah, technically it's possible. But I would say it's more likely that you're going to do the right thing for what you think you need to do, because you're the one that loves your child. You're the one that brought them into this world. You're the one who's staying up at night when they have the fever. You're the one, right, that wants them to be successful, that's going to spend the time to help them learn, how do you deal with failure? How do you deal with whatever it is? And you just can't get that if it's just this one, top down, here's a curriculum, here's what you must do. And by the way, we're going to teach you how to take a test, not because it helps you in life, but because it helps the school with their whatever. So they're just not even in the same camps in terms of incentives. So I know we kind of went sideways on that one, but there's a lot of layers to that.
We explore all the layers. I love it. I think that's great. And one of the pieces that you mentioned there that I think is important to touch on is how, not all teachers are bad. A lot of the teachers within this fiat schooling system are wonderful, excellent people who want the best for these kids. And I can definitely, look back on my own time going through public school. Some of them are really awesome. I still keep in touch with them. They really join that job because they care about teaching. Yeah. But the problem is the system itself. Yeah. And this is, another common theme in Bitcoin is same as, the political system. There are people that go through that. And I'm sure they have the really best intentions in mind to help their constituents and, pass good laws or whatever. But the system is so rotten, it's impossible for them to overpower it, no matter how good they are. And the best ones end up leaving and, starting a podcast or something more independent because they realize they can't change the system. And this is the same for the teaching system.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying teachers are bad, administrators are bad, or I do think there's some people out there with bad intentions. I do not think that all people, though, especially those that choose that profession, go into that with the idea that they're there to harm people. That is not my message at all. I'm speaking in generalities with that. Just like if you go to universities, yes, most universities are so far on one side of the political spectrum that it's like indoctrination. It does not mean you don't have libertarian or Austrian economic types of professors out there. So I'm not saying that the individuals are there. I'm really glad you brought that up. I do think that the majority of people go into that profession and they have good intentions of what they're trying to do. I would say you're really handcuffed. You're not going to, the pay is going to be kind of limited, and you're probably going to be worried, if I don't follow what the administrators say to do, I lose my job. And now my family is at risk. So, and then you say, even if you get past that, you say, I'm willing to take that risk. You only have so much time in the day. So if you have 25 kids and 5 need extra special help because they're slow and 5 have the potential to do really, really well, you ignore them and you focus on the 15 in the middle. because you only have so many hours and resources in the day. So even with the greatest intentions, they're in a very difficult role. So I appreciate you standing up for that. I didn't mean to imply that all teachers were somehow bad.
And I know that there's this pattern, which we're seeing in all sorts of different industries, and I don't know the details of it exactly, but there's more and more survey type things coming out where students will, like, grade their teachers at the end of the year. How did they do? Did they make you feel good? And a lot of the weight of those is being put on, like, did you like them? Did they make you feel good, rather than did they teach you something important and powerful? And did they go against the grain and make you think differently and challenge your views? And so many people and so many kids going through these systems are sort of weakened by it, for the reasons we've talked about. They're sort of just put into this, simple track of, like, just, answer these questions correctly. If you think outside the box, you're bad, basically. And so then when these teachers do come in who challenge them and, maybe do things that we would consider good, which is make them think differently outside the box, the kids have a negative impression of that because it's different than what they were told earlier on. And those teachers will then be sort of pushed out of that system. Is that basically, do you know the details of that? I've heard people talking about this, how I can't remember who it is, but some teacher that I've listened to on a podcast talked about how he was basically pushed out of a school he worked at because he was challenging the status quo.
You can get pushed out for a lot of things. There's a part of the similarities, I think, between the education side and Bitcoin is there's also the then they fight you stage, right? So you get big enough and now they fight you. So as the political agendas have risen, if you try to stand up for critical thinking and having a different point of view, if you didn't, for example, there's a case, I don't remember what it was. There's multiple cases, but there was a teacher called a student by their wrong pronoun. And I forget what it was like a fire drill or something else. Somebody had said something, and there was no intention, there was no intent behind what he had said that was meant to be derogatory. He had disagreed with it, and he had been calling the student by their first name. But somehow an incident happened, and he accidentally said the wrong pronoun. He got fired, and he had to go through years of lawsuits and a lot of turmoil. So he was personally put through a grinder, and for what? Because someone had an agenda and said, you have to talk this way, you have to believe this way, you have to do whatever it was, you have to fit this mold. So you not everybody's going to go through that, but there's a lot of pressures that they're probably under. I haven't gone deep on it. My guess is they also have huge pressures to make sure that their kids do well on standardized tests. Therefore, instead of me teaching you about critical thinking or AI or something other that might be more, maybe monetary literacy, that'd be great, energy literacy. Instead of teaching about those, I'm going to teach you how to do well on your standardized test. I don't really care that it doesn't help you in real life because I'm being evaluated on how well my kids do on that. So now there's just a whole lot of things in there. I kind of look at it's almost similar to the medical system. If you have a teacher and a student and you had the same as a doctor and a patient and there was nobody else between them, that makes sense to me. When you layer in unions, administrators, political factors, whatever they might be,
insurance
funds,
providers,
insurance,
managers,
when you layer in all these other things in between, then the people who suffer are the people that you say you're supposed to be there for. Right. And it's the same like the medical. When you have insurance and the pharmaceuticals and the medical devices, and then you have the politicians that are supported by all those big industries, you don't get the best care for the patient. Right. Instead of again, technology should be deflationary. We should have the best medical care ever and at a lower cost right now, theoretically. Why are our medical costs so high? Well, look at all those other layers of things that are in between, and that the people who suffer are the people who actually need the treatment. If you take all that away and you separate medicine and state and let the doctors actually talk to their patients again, I think that's kind of the same thing with education. the intent may have been good, but over time, there's a lot of players in here who have other intentions, and the people who suffer are going to be the students. And so get them out of the way and let the teachers do that. And I would say, if you just take it a step further, the fully decentralized education is homeschooling, because now you're all the way down to the parent. But the more you bring on these other incentives, and then the fiat, the nature of the fiat money. Again, I go back to Seb Bunny's book, because he talks about this in a lot of different areas. The unintended consequences of the inflation of fiat money corrupts everything. It defends medical education. It all eventually will be corrupted. So.
Yeah. There are just so many Bitcoin analogies that fit in perfectly. I mean, you just talked about the peer-to-peer of it, or just removing the bloat in between the teacher and student, which should be nothing. There should be nothing in the way of that. It should be just, the simple teacher and student, and the freedom to be able to like ebb and flow with where that student's head is at and what they're good at. And we kind of keep coming back to that, because I think that's the most important thing, just giving them the ability to flow with what works well for them and what they want to do. And another note I had here that I want to touch on is this idea that's sort of been fabricating in my brain as you're talking about this idea of good boredom and bad boredom. There's different types of boredom. And when I think of the fiat schooling system, when you're just there and just like filling out these bubbles on a sheet and, answering these questions, scared of getting one wrong, and, just staring at the clock, waiting for it to go to lunchtime so you can go eat some rectangle plastic pizza. That's a whole other subject to the fiat food stuff and what's being forced on kids in the schools is, it's really disturbing. It makes everything worse, because their brain is being poisoned at the same time.
Brain's being poisoned. And then you wonder why kids can't sit still, and they're sleep. I mean, now you're into the big farm thing where they say, well, we recommend that you take these drugs. We're going to identify you with some kind of attention disorder. And then it just feeds on itself. And it's, that in itself is a whole hour-long, discussion. So, and I'm sorry, my little guy here is upset with me. So
no worries.
Yeah.
That's like a huge piece that that sort of outside of our scope today. But I mean, we talk a lot about food on this show, and that's always important. What you're fueling yourself with is important, and there's so many steps that you can take there. Even the parents that are listening to this who are still sending their kids to public school, and they're trying to just take a positive step in the right direction, maybe not go extreme to all the way homeschool. You can start just helping your kid by just changing their breakfast, like switching from cereal and soy milk, which is unfortunately what I had pretty much my entire young life.
I ate horribly growing up, and now that we studied fiat food, this is actually, you and Tali can go deep on this. I'm with you. I ate poorly, but then my parents thought they were doing what was recommended, and then the result is these things compound on each other. So now you're less healthy, and you have all these other things that we talked about, and
they do it with love. They're doing their very best with what they know, and unfortunately, the messages being pushed into the brains of so many parents is that meat is bad, fat is bad, more carbs, more seed oils, all that crap. But so the parents that want to just make a quick step, just switch their breakfast out for bacon and eggs.
Yes.
And watch them immediately start doing better.
Yes. And
that's an important first step. And pack their lunch for them and put some steak or some ground beef and some eggs in there or something healthy, and they will immediately start doing better, and then everything can improve from there. Whenever you're improving your health, anything can improve.
100%.
We're like, oh yeah, I was originally talking about the boredom thing though. So bad boredom is when you're stuck in class, filling out these answers on a bubble sheet, staring at the clock. I would say a good boredom that we talked about earlier as well is when you are in sort of a more open environment where it kind of forces you to figure out something to entertain yourself. And I'm
Does.
sure you've seen lots of examples of this where, boredom can be a good thing. You're seeing them, those gears in the brain start to turn, like, how do I entertain myself? And they start building blocks, like you said, or they start reading a book. How would you talk about that contrast between bad and good boredom, and why
Mm.
people should think about that, and like how boredom isn't always bad, but it can be helpful?
I actually think you did a really good job explaining it right there. It's okay to be bored. Go out and figure out something to do. Think about what the high time preference society that we're in, where I have immediate gratification with social media or emails or news or anything else, and it's just constant, constant, constant. And it's okay to stop and to think, to not to and when you struggle with boredom, I think you described it pretty well. That's something that it's kind of a lost a lot. I don't say a lost skill is. I mean, you can get it back, but um, I I completely agree with you. You don't have to entertain kids 100% of the time. That is not your responsibility. And if they go outside and they have to create their own cowboys and Indian games using sticks because you didn't buy them any squirt guns or laser tag guns or something else, they're using their imagination. Okay, like that's okay to be creative. If you're inside because it's a rainy day and you have to figure out something else with your toys, maybe you'll spend more time with the pets. Maybe you'll spend more time in nature. Maybe you'll spend more time reading. I think it's good to have good boredom. I agree with you. There's good and bad. There are good and bad types of boredom. And today it's way too easy with the phone and the internet and all the other devices to just expect instant gratification and get that dopamine hit from whatever it is that you're doing. And you never really learn to struggle through ideas on your own. You're not practicing creativity. You're not practicing problem solving. That's how you get better. You get better you don't go to the gym and then don't push yourself. Well, your mind needs to be pushed, and sometimes that boredom is part of that thinking, problem solving process.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's so important for people to understand, is you're not doing your kids a favor by saving them from being bored with, like, throwing an iPad in front of them, like we talked about, or something to just like take away that boredom. You want to let them go through that process so they can themselves figure out how to entertain themselves with their imagination. And it's such a powerful tool.
It is. It really is. I could not agree with you more on that. So
I think we could start slowly bringing this thing home by just looking at the big picture here. And we talked about this a couple of times, but how would you describe the landscape right now? I know there's so many more people in the Bitcoin world talking about homeschooling and exploring this idea, but how is it looking around the world? Like, is this like international? Is this movement growing? Or more and more parents figuring this out? Is it gaining momentum? And how is that sort of brushing up against, like we talked about, how some governments are just making it illegal to do this? And how do you see this playing out in the coming years?
I will just preface it by saying I don't consider myself a subject matter expert globally. I do think it's a pretty global world, though, and it's going to be a battle. So if you have made your living and you have your power and your money based on a certain way, you're not going to give it up easily. And so as more and more people are seeing how, like, the frog is now being boiled and people realize what's going on. And sorry, my dog is just really losing his mind over here.
He's getting through his boredom.
No,
he's going through the process of boredom.
I think he has a different issue to go out with. The more and more people are going to resist, and just like with the fourth turning idea, when you get through a certain, well, we're approaching the crisis phase. So I think what's going to happen is this is going to be volatile. I don't think you transition from one money system to another without volatility. I don't think we transition from the system we have today without a lot of volatility. And I think globally, what you're going to have is you're going to just have different versions of this playing out. It seems to me that Europe is digging its heels in on going to centralization and socialism. The U.S. seems to be more in the populist stage, where people are pretty pissed off about the system, and they're going to put in people they think are going to disrupt the system. If you are the unions, for example, are really upset with some of the things that Trump's doing. Here Trump comes in and he says he's going to eliminate the Department of Education and do other things. You're seeing a lot of legal action. You're seeing a lot of different, like the social media side it's polarizing depending on where you're at. So I think we're in for more of that. And I don't know around the world where different countries are. If some countries already have more control, they're going to be able to cap that. So if you're already in a totalitarian type of an environment that controls and has a lockdown on what's said and not said, I don't think you're going to see much change because they're already in control. I think in other places where there's some degree of freedom to speak out and to take alternative actions, then you're going to see more of that. So I think homeschooling as a percentage is going to continue to increase in the United States. I think as Bitcoin grows and more people go through that process of learning about load-based Austrian economics, load time preference, and all these other principles that we talk about, these first principle ideas, it's going to be harder and harder to hold the ideas of freedom back. So, for example, I don't want to get too technical because I don't know the exact, who the listener's level, but if you look at what Nostr is doing on communication, where you're going to take control of your identity, and you hear about the ideas that we're talking about today, it might take you a long time, but maybe you leave your jurisdiction and you go to another country, and you can't do it today and you can't do it tomorrow. But what's going to happen is I think people will start to vote with their feet, depending on these jurisdictions. And people are going to fight. And I don't think you can just hold these ideas in. Just like I don't think now that the idea of a scarce digital asset like Bitcoin is out there, even if someone found a way, I don't think they will, but hypothetically someone found a way of destroying Bitcoin, that concept is already it's already out there. And the same thing is going on with communications. And now it's going to impact everything. It's going to impact food, medicine, education, take your pick. These ideas are going to be out there. And I don't think what we've heard in the last few decades about where the trends had been going, I think that was a minority. I think that was a very vocal minority. And what's happened now is more people are speaking up and more people are taking action. And as more people take action, they're going to be encouraged that they can take action too. So I think it's a powder keg, and I think it's more aligned with the fourth turning type of idea, where let's say it takes, if you follow that philosophy, we're in the fourth phase, and we're probably 5 to 10 years away from getting to the next phase, which would be abundance phase and peace. So I think it's going to get more volatile both ways. There are going to be more people homeschooling. There are going to be more people using other tools that are available to educate the kids the way that they think that they should be educated. The people who have certain types of power are going to try to do more extreme things to keep their power, to hold people down through legislation, through other means. I think that's the battle. I think it's going to be more volatile for 5 to 10 years. And then, I don't know. And again, I just caveat the whole thing as in, it's fun to talk about. I don't consider myself a global expert on all these different trends, but it just seems to be consistent with the other things that we're seeing. That's logically where I think education is going to follow. And that's a really bright future in 5 or 10 years. But for the moment, it's an uphill battle. And depending on what stage you're in personally, you have options, but just realize that you have options with your money too, right? So you just have to make decisions. How are you going to use your time? How are you going to use your resources? And in the case of your family, what are you going to do with education? They're all going to go together, in my opinion.
I love that. Everything about that I agree with. And the one little piece I would add as the perfect topper to that is that going into this battle that you mentioned, that I think we can all see is brewing, the biggest power structure of the state that's trying to crack down on all this is the money printer.
Mm-hmm.
So when you buy Bitcoin, you are helping defund this giant apparatus that has all this power and is trying to crack down on everybody. So buying Bitcoin itself is being part of the solution, which is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot discount that. Joining Nostr, like you talked about, opening up communication to make free speech truly free again is huge.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the food component, how eating more healthy food helps everyone's brains just work better and their
Mm-hmm.
hormones work better, so we can have like a more powerful ground up grassroots force. All of
Mm-hmm.
these pieces come into it, and that's why all three of those things, the money, the Nostr, and the carnivore, are all pieces of this that will help
Mm-hmm.
people.
I agree.
And it's
Yeah.
it's so important. I love that, and I agree with your outlook that it's going to get weirder before it gets better first, but freedom is going to win in the end. And I'm
Yeah.
very optimistic about that. And I think more parents should be, just diving into these rabbit holes with us, because they give you a very long-term outlook, even longer than they already have. As we talk about how having kids just lowers your time preference already and makes you
Mm-hmm.
think more long-term, which is why it's so powerful. But then the more you learn about these solutions, even those parents that may be a little bit nervous about the future will become more optimistic,
Mm-hmm.
more motivated to help build these solutions that's going to make their kids and their grandkids' lives better.
Yeah.
Scott, where can go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to add. I mean, I want to leave on a high note because it's worth it. Homeschoolers are known for having bigger families than non-homeschoolers in general. I think Bitcoiners are there as well. And in terms of globally, one thing I did hear recently was that the birth rates in a lot of countries that are having problems have fallen to a level that is not enough to sustain the population. Those are all symptoms of what we just described. And I think they will, I want to leave on the optimistic note. It's 100% worth it to have a family, 100% worth it to homeschool. And you don't have to try to solve these big picture things. Take care of yourself, take care of your family. And then if you can have a podcast, if you can do books, if you can do other things and help, that's great. But it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it's not selfish. If you take care of yourself and your family and you do the right thing, and we all do that, then you are helping to become part of the better future. So I don't want to leave on the high note. I'm really, really bullish about the future. Really amazing things are going to be out there. We do have some weirdness to get through, but it's okay. It's not the first time in history that humans have gone through, these different periods. And if you zoom out and you say, oh, okay. And just, this is the time, this is our time. What are you going to do with your time? That's your question. And so anyway, sorry, go ahead and.
No, I love it. I think that's the exact mindset to have, and to be optimistic, but really lock in and understand what your purpose is here. Stay motivated, stay angry at the right places, stay loving at the right places. Just keep your head on a swivel at all times. Where can people follow you, Scott, and learn more about this project you're building, the Huddle Up game, the Free Market Kids, all this good stuff that you're putting out there for the world?
Oh, thanks for that. So freemarketkids.com is the best way to look at the products that we already have with the games. You can also, there's a place there if you want to send me an email. It's just Scott@freemarketkids. On Twitter, it's Scott Lindberg 93 or Free Market Kids. Either one of those will come to me. I can give you a Nostr link if you like that as well.
We always show the Nostr in here every time.
All right. I think it's. I gotta look at what I gotta get used to what the short version is. I don't have it handy. I'm just thinking of the QR code I send off. But
the NPub works
the
too.
NPub,
I usually throw that in there so people just copy and paste it. But yeah, excellent. Well, I'm so excited to see what you continue to build and just learning more about the space in general, because this is something that I want to learn more about and be prepared for in my own life. So really appreciate all the work you're doing, the education you're putting out there, and the content you're giving to people who need it. The games, games are such a good way for people to learn. So Looking forward to more people finding that. And I appreciate you so much for your time, Scott, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Thanks, Ben.